It is Wednesday, May 10th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. With me are Jared Smola and C.H. Herms. Boys, I got stuck between boys and guys, so I'm just going to call you buys, and we'll turn this into a buy-sell hold report. But we're almost 2 weeks removed from the NFL draft. It's the heart of rookie draft season. We've got Best Ball Mania 4 rolling. If you're not a dynasty player and you're just a redraft or a best ball player, that's going. So there's lots of best ball drafting going on. You've probably seen plenty of instant reactions to all the draft picks at this point. Everybody's sad over where all our offensive favorites landed. We're going to get to some of those guys, but it's time to measure the actual impact. We'll look at how rookie drafts are actually playing out. We'll look at some of the impacts on redraft kind of stuff. We're still going to be rookie focused today because that's the season right now, but the projections are certainly live on draftsharks.com. So you can see exactly how these guys stack up against everybody else and how they're affecting players around them. The rookie draft in our Draft Sharks Superflex Dynasty League on FFPC is nearing completion even. Jared, do you have any favorite picks from your draft at this point on that one?
No, I didn't have a ton of draft capital, which tends to be kind of how I play Dynasty. I like trading those picks for veterans. I'm kind of always in win now mode. That team's been in win now mode for a while. But yeah, it's nice to have just been in some drafts at this point, to actually have been on the clock and having to decide between this second round receiver versus this third round running back. So I think our takes are probably stronger now than they were the day after the draft.
Yeah, I have a 250 Dynasty League draft going on FFPC as well, and I had my second pick come up, and I think it's like round 4. I'm like, wait a second, the draft's already this far in. I only need one pick so far, but I look at my team and I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I did that. Herms, how many drafts you got going right now?
I want to hear what Jared had to say.
Oh, I would say I still think it's not a bad year to not have a ton of rookie picks. I think trading them for veterans or even trading it into 2024 is still a decent move.
As far as I'm concerned, it's always okay to not have a ton of rookie picks. Obviously, assuming that you're doing it right. It doesn't mean sell those rookie picks for anything, but we don't ever want to rebuild these teams, right? That's part of our core dynasty philosophy. All right, Herms, how many rookie drafts you got going right now?
Thankfully not too many more, but definitely I've been through a lot, and just the terrifying feeling that I'm always on the clock somewhere is something that, the beautiful part of the year. My sleeper app is very busy, a lot of notifications, all sorts of fun stuff going on there. But I think I'm almost done with, I think it's 9 or 10 of them or something like that, something crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to ignore any you're on the clock notifications that hit my phone during this. I don't think any league I have has a clock that's so short that it's going to run out while I'm here. So we'll focus in. We did do podcasts previewing all of these rookies going by position before the draft. And I mean, even though we're now after the draft, it's fine to go back and listen to those. You can still hear us talking happily about guys like Zach Charbonnet, and maybe you'll get real evaluations of the players as opposed to the post-draft biased version. So you can find those on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If you do want to go back and listen, and if you're new to this, if you like our show, if you like this one, if you like any of those you listen to, if you just think Jared's eyes are pretty, let us know. You can help us out by subscribing, rating, reviewing on whatever platform you use. Tell us what you like about the show. Or frankly, you can tell us what you don't like about the show. Anybody who's been listening to us for a long time and has reached out to give me feedback can tell you, I listen to it, I take it to heart, we'll make changes for things that need changing. Or if it's something I don't think needs to change, I'll tell you why I don't think it needs to change. Either way, we'd love to hear from you. So let's jump to these rookies now. And we're not going to run through all of them because that's not what time it is. But I do think we need to start in round 1 because the way that round 1 went for the wide receivers is significant. And there are lots of players that people planted flags with. They might have changed those opinions at this point. Just in case anybody has forgotten in the 2 weeks since, we had 4 wideouts go in round 1. They went in immediate succession late in round 1. We had Jaxon Smith-Njigba to the Seahawks, Quentin Johnston to the Chargers, Zay Flowers to the Ravens, Jordan Addison to the Vikings, 4 successive picks. Jared, did the way this happened change anything for you, either for the whole group or individuals?
So my top 4 wide receivers stayed in the same order: Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers. A couple things changed, like the gaps between those top 3 guys, between JSN and Johnson and Addison, they got smaller, especially the top 2. And then also for me, pre-draft, JSN was my number 2 overall for one quarterback leagues behind Bijan. Post-draft, he dropped to 3 behind Jahmyr Gibbs. So, JSN did fall a little bit, but to me, he's still the wide receiver 1 in this class. I think it just goes back to the fact that, to me, he was clearly the best prospect coming in. And I think, we say all the time, don't overrate landing spots. I'm putting it into practice here. And despite the fact that, Quentin Johnston's landing spot is a lot more exciting, I'm going to stick with my, pre-draft evaluation on JSN, and he's still my top guy in this wide receiver class.
And I think specifically for him, it is a negative landing spot for immediate return, but you can't be too immediate when you're evaluating these guys. And by next year, it could be a different wide receiver situation in Seattle. So I agree. I think for this 4, the way it happened shouldn't change your priors on these, unless you had one of these guys way behind everybody else because you expected him to go in round 2, maybe you bump him up in this group. But if you had all 4 of these guys close together, I don't think anything here should really change that a whole lot. Herms, what about you? Any change in your opinion of these 4 wideouts based on how round 1 played out?
No, it worked out really well. I have them in the same order that I did before. Jaxon Smith-Njigba was still number 1. I mean, just because Tyler Lockett's still there and just because DK Metcalf is still there doesn't mean that he's going to be good, eventually. And, keep in mind, folks, Tyler Lockett's not getting any younger. He's already pushing up into his mid-30s. And DK Metcalf, I believe, does have an opt-out in his contract after 2024. If for any reason this whole Seahawks experiment falls apart, it's not inconceivable that JSN could just be the number 1 dude as soon as 2025, whatever. I don't know. But actually, as late as 2025. He'll probably be better before that. But the big thing that I really want to hammer at is Jordan Addison going to the Vikings. Because, we were talking, if we're talking a lot of dynasty stuff right now, but for you best ball heads out there, if you're doing all those drafts, I think the best rookie wide receiver for this season may in fact end up being Addison, because the Vikings do run so many 3 wide receiver sets. Like Adam Thielen's out the way. There's going to be so much opportunity for Addison out there running opposite Justin Jefferson, and it wouldn't be shocking if he produces over 1,000 yards, some sort of crazy rookie season. And I don't know, that's the one that excited me the most. But, Johnston, Flowers, I both had them, I think 3 and 4 respectively. And those landing spots are interesting, but there's some traffic ahead of them on the depth chart. But either way, all good.
I agree with you on Addison for best ball. And it's interesting, he's still going behind JSN in underdog drafts. And I think that's a mistake. I think Addison's going in the range where you can take him at wide receiver 35 on underdog. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is a do not draft for me at wide receiver 29 in underdog drafts for redraft. I agree with you guys on him not changing. I don't want to, he's not my number 1. I'll talk about that in a minute. I agree with the landing spot not changing him overall longer term, but I think it absolutely changes him for this year's draft specifically. Jared, what about you with JSN for 2023?
Yeah, I'm off him at wide receiver 29, unfortunately. I mean, landing with 2 high-end wide receivers. Now, flashback a couple of years, we saw JSN outproduce 2 high-end wide receivers at Ohio State and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. So I'm not projecting him to outproduce Metcalf or Lockett this season, but it's also not impossible if he's as good as some people think he is. Like, maybe he does at least make it like a 3-horse race for the top wide receiver there. I'm with you guys too on Addison being the best short-term fantasy asset landing in Minnesota. The Vikings kind of quietly, I didn't even realize this until I started, digging into 2023 projections, but Minnesota ranked 3rd last year in both pass rate and total pass attempts. And I think as Herm said, Adam Thielen gone. Thielen saw 107 targets last year. I think that's like exactly what we have Addison projected for right now. So even, he's never going to be the number 1 receiver in Minnesota, which I think is fine, because I think that was one of the questions with him anyways. He's only 173 pounds. Can he be a lead receiver at the next level? He's not going to have to be in Minnesota, but I think there's still plenty of volume available to him, even behind Jefferson.
Yeah, I agree with that. There was a lot more passing in Minnesota last year, and I thought that KJ Osborne was better than he was when I looked back at those numbers. So I think the immediate opportunities there. I think Addison, for me, got the best positive impact because I wondered if he was going to fall into round 2, given that he's not especially big, not especially fast. And there were these other productive guys. So that he went right with them in the draft, I think solidifies that it's the top 4. Quentin Johnston, as I've said all along, was my number 1 wide receiver from the first point at which we did these rankings. And nothing's changed for me there, because even though he lands with the Chargers, who have Mike Williams, who have Keenan Allen, I mean, those two are even shakier beyond this season than Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Mike Williams has never been a target hog. So even if he's there, forever with the Chargers, he doesn't look like the same bet as DK Metcalf to lead the wide receiver core in targets, or at least to get to the point where you can't be a close number 2. And then Keenan Allen, I mean, there were rumors about him potentially leaving the team this offseason before he restructured his contract. He's getting older. He looks older than Tyler Lockett. So I think Keenan Allen's probably out of the picture by next year. And Quentin Johnston could be excellent by next year and could definitely factor into one of the most pass-heavy offenses this season.
Yeah, so Allen and Mike Williams are both signed through 2024, but they both carry cap hits over $30 million in 2024. I don't think it's possible for the Chargers to keep both of those guys unless, one or both restructure those deals. So I kind of do think one of them will be gone next year. That obviously opens things up for Quentin Johnston. I like the landing spot. You also, obviously, you're tied to Justin Herbert, which is good news. We talked pre-draft about how, Quentin Johnston's a interesting prospect because he's a bigger guy, but he almost plays smaller. And to me, his best aspect of his game is his after catch ability, which is what you think of a more smaller wide receiver. So he needed to land with a good offensive coordinator. Kellen Moore, to me, is near the top of the league of OCs I trust to get the most out of Quentin Johnston. And I just watched one of Brandon Staley's post-draft press conferences, and he specifically highlighted Quentin Johnston's yards after catch ability, even mentioned that he averaged 8.9 yards after catch last year. So I do think this is the coaching staff that Quentin Johnston needed to use him correctly at the NFL level.
Kellen Moore ran 4 offenses for Dallas. 3 of them finished inside the top 9 in net yards per pass attempt. That included last year where Dak Prescott missed nearly a third of the season. So I agree. The fit's great. I'm excited about Quentin Johnston. Really, at this point, that's the one thing where I'm like, man, maybe I shouldn't have given away all those round 1 rookie picks. So I got to decide just what I'm willing to try to give away for him in trade. So we'll see how that sorts out. But we're going to move ahead to the round 2 wide receivers now. And I mean, depending on how you look at it, might even be a more interesting group just because we knew what the top 4 basically was, even if we disagreed on the specific order of the players. Round 2, we got Jonathan Mingo going to Carolina, Jaden Reed going to Green Bay, Rashee Rice going to the Chiefs. I'm going to have to give him a call and maybe see exactly where the emphasis belongs in that name. Then Marvin Mims to the Broncos. So Herms, first off, I guess, who would you be drafting first among these guys in a rookie draft right now? You're on the clock. They're all on the board and you can't take anybody else.
Well, in that situation, I think we have to go with the Mingo Bingo. Come on, everybody. I mean, if you look over on our YouTube channel, one of the fun things that I did before the draft was putting together some fun team and prospect fits. And one of the things that I mentioned was wouldn't it be cool if the Carolina Panthers had some big-bodied X receiver, because Frank Reich running that offense that he had over there in Indianapolis, scheming up a lot of targets and touches for Michael Pittman Jr. Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? Then they went ahead and did that by bringing in Jonathan Mingo. And, if you go over to the website, check out his profile, there are some things missing from Jonathan Mingo's production in college. But the one thing we do know is that he's huge and he can make some plays happen. And now that we know that he's going to be paired with Bryce Young long-term, I think it would be a ton of fun. I got to be honest, Jaden Reed's pretty close there at number 2 for me. But if I'm just going with the most fun thing and then also just kind of, just picking up the baton from myself for a call that I made beforehand, yeah, Jonathan Mingo. It makes all the sense in the world. I did not think he would get drafted as high as he did. So, I'm willing to trust the Panthers. I'm willing to trust them.
Nothing like running a relay race with yourself over Jonathan Mingo. Jared, yeah. I think you became a bigger fan of Jonathan Mingo while doing his prospect profile. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, he's easy to get excited about. Like Herm said, he's 6'2", 220 pounds. He tested off the charts, 98th percentile relative athletic score. And there's fun stuff on tape, right? He's good downfield. You see the speed downfield. He's really good after the catch. He's another guy, not quite as good as Quentin Johnston to me, but Mingo averaged 7.3 yards after the catch per reception last year, again at 220 pounds. He was also one of only 12 wide receivers in the country to earn a perfect PFF grade on deep balls. So again, he has the deep ball ability, he has the after catch ability, he has the size. I'm trying not to get too excited because the production profile just isn't there. I mean, he spent 4 years at Ole Miss. He never led the team in receiving. Now, if you go back to his junior year, it looked like he was about to break out that year. He put up big numbers through, I think it was the first 3 games. Then he suffered that stress fracture in his foot, missed the rest of the season. And, it's possible that was even still a factor last year, because that is a tough injury for receivers to recover from. But again, so the production's not there, but then you factor in, you got the draft capital. I like the landing spot. He's tied to Bryce Young. I think Frank Reich's a good offensive mind. There are guys in Carolina's wide receiver core, but like no one I'm particularly worried about. Like if Mingo's the man, he can be the number 1 wide receiver there. Like even like by the end of this season, right? Like there's no one there we're super worried about. So, and especially in this class where there's not a ton to get excited about outside the top, 10 or so picks in these rookie drafts. I think Mingo's worth considering when you get to like the end of round 1 in 1 quarterback leagues, and then like early middle round 2 in super flex.
I don't disagree with any of the sales points on Jonathan Mingo so far, but I think my issue with him is that everybody has changed their mind about Jonathan Mingo based on where he went in the draft. And even though we're not excited about any wide receivers currently in Carolina, they did sign Adam Thielen for a pretty good bit of money and then called him a key piece of replacing DJ Moore. Now, I think that's a laughable notion, but it at least points to the role that Adam Thielen's going to play right away. They signed DJ Chark. They still have Terrace Marshall around. So, although that's a depth chart that Mingo could climb this year, it's also a depth chart that he could sit 4th in all year. And I think there's a distinct possibility that a year from now, people are like, man, why was I so excited about Jonathan Mingo last spring? And then all of a sudden he's buyable. So I am concerned about not producing early in college. I know that the COVID year kind of threw off a little bit of when people's breakouts happen. There was the injury that you mentioned, and he absolutely, could be good here. My pullback, and maybe it's just what I always do, but when I see everybody say, wow, Mingo, now he's my guy, I'm like, oh, wait a second. Why were we not this excited before? Maybe we're overreacting.
Yeah, again, in this class, I think you could easily make a case for him as the wide receiver 5. If I'm actually in a rookie draft though, and like he's sitting there and I'm in that spot where he's like about to go, I'm trading down, and Marvin Mims is still my guy in this tier. And these 4 wide receivers are all in the same tier for me, but I actually prefer Mims best among them, and he tends to go 4th among these guys. Like he's been going late 2nd in most of the rookie drafts I've been in so far. Go back to the prospect profile. Production-wise, awesome. He breaks out as a freshman, leads Oklahoma in receiving yards all 3 of his years there. Early declare. He just turned 21 years old. He runs a 4.38 at the combine. So a lot to like for Mims just as a prospect pre-draft. Falls to the late 2nd round, but Denver made him their first pick of the draft, and they traded up to get him. And let's remember, this is the first draft under new head coach Sean Payton. So that means a lot to me. I know there's, Jerry Jeudy is still there. His 5th-year option was picked up, so he's signed for 2 more years. Cortland Sutton's still there for now, but I think Denver saves $10 million if they move on from Cortland Sutton after this season. So even if that the trade rumors don't come to fruition, I think there's a good chance Sutton is gone by next year. So I could see Mims being a top 2 wide receiver on this team. And quarterback questions long term with Wilson there, but I do like Sean Payton and obviously what he did in New Orleans for all those years.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good situation, maybe even a better situation than Seattle, to say, if you look at it right away, you think it's crowded, you think Marvin Mims is blocked, and that his value takes a big hit. But I mean, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, there's even a better chance than with the guys in Seattle that any of these guys could be out of the picture by next year and creating space for Marvin Mims. So Jared, if you're not able to trade down, if you have to make a pick and it's Jonathan Mingo and Marvin Mims still on the board, are you taking Mingo ahead of Mims, or are you taking Mims?
I might take Mingo just for the dynasty value and hope to flip him in a month or two, right? Like if the rest of my league views Mingo higher, maybe just to accrue as much value as I can, I might just end up taking Mingo. But like if I'm forced to pick and I can't trade these guys, I do prefer Mims.
Herms, do you think that tends to work, taking a guy that you don't really want more and then trying to trade him within the next 2 months?
Rarely, if ever, but sometime but it all comes back to if you know your league mates. It depends on who you know and what they're all about.
I would just caution you, Jared, that if nobody in your league is willing to trade up to get Mingo, the chances are low that they're going to trade to get Mingo later on. I can't leave this section without talking about Jayden Reed, of course, because I've been talking about him through much of draft season. People kind of caught up on Jayden Reed, and then he finally landed in round 2, and he landed with a Green Bay team that presents immediate opportunity. We talked about the depth charts elsewhere giving opportunity. Green Bay presents that as well. Christian Watson looks like he's going to lead that crew. He's the most physically gifted receiver on hand there. He's also heading into just year 2, so we don't really know what his role is going to look like. Romeo Doubs spent a lot of time starting last year. He had a really nice camp and impressed coaches there. Maybe he's set as the number 2, or maybe Jayden Reed challenges that. Maybe Jayden Reed just fits in the slot between those guys, and they're all on the field, and Reed is a good source of target share while sharing the field with those players. For me, I'm betting on a player who was an immediate target share grabber in college, did so as a true freshman at Western Michigan, despite Dwayne Eskridge being on that team. Then he transferred to Michigan State. What I read was he was looking for a bigger challenge. So he went to Western Michigan. He was like, this is easy. I'm going to go to a bigger school. Went to Michigan State and immediately got target share there as well. Produced there across his time. Not the biggest guy, not the fastest guy. This was a good class in which to be neither of those things. So I like the player. I like the opportunity. I'm taking Jayden Reed ahead of the rest of these guys because I believe more in him, both fit-wise and the proven production to this point.
Didn't we both have him in our top 10 in the pre-draft rankings?
I believe so.
Yes, dude. I'm so excited about it because the greatest thing that he has going for him, like kind of the opposite of some of the guys that we were talking about before, is like just the immediate path to production. Because I mean, like outside of Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, what's on the Packers roster? I mean, those tight ends, the 2 rookies that they both drafted, they have to sort their own situation out, but that's the tight end position. We're not talking about receiver, folks. And I think if I remember correctly in the profile, we had mentioned something about how Jayden Reed was, kind of lined up out wide a lot in college. Maybe it wasn't always the best fit for him, but I remember he was either at the Senior Bowl or the East-West game, whichever. Yeah. And people kept talking about the fact that when he was running those receiver drills, like doing the slot stuff, they were all like, oh, wow, look at this kid. Oh, he could be something. And now look at him. Now look at him, folks. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, he spent most of last year working outside for Michigan State, and then at the Senior Bowl, where it is NFL coaches running things, he was almost exclusively in the slot. So that to me says the NFL's like, kid, you're going to make it in the slot. We'll see what Green Bay says.
Yeah, definitely a post-draft riser, largely because he goes 50th overall, which is awesome draft capital, and definitely way higher than I expected him to go. I think the landing spot is okay. Like there's definitely a path to immediate playing time. Now, the Packers, even with Aaron Rodgers, they were like a balanced offense in terms of run pass split under Matt LaFleur. Now that it's Jordan Love, like I think it's going to be a run heavy offense. So, and of course, Love himself is a major question mark. Like Green Bay might be looking for a new quarterback at this time next year. So there are some questions there, but just draft capital alone, I think Reed needs to move up your rookie wide receiver rankings, and he still goes late in some of these drafts too. Matt, I think our draft sharks league, he even dropped to the late 3rd, didn't he? It's super flex, but he was a late 3rd rounder.
Yeah, I was annoyed to see where he went. I think I took Noah Fant at the end of that one because even though it's called a rookie draft, there's veterans on the board. It's tight end premium. So it was a no-brainer for Noah Fant over Jayden Reed. That particular format also kind of downplays the value of being patient with players, but typical dynasty rookie drafts, I think Jayden Reed belongs anywhere in round 2. And yep. I agree. I've been seeing him fall. So he's definitely somebody to target. Before we get out of this section, we got to talk Rashee Rice. Jared, do you think that people are overrating the landing spot for him going to Kansas City?
Probably. I mean, it's tough not to, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes and a wide receiver core that's still wide open. So a couple things on Rice. One, I think at least I probably underrated him as a prospect pre-draft. Had the massive 2022 season, 96 catches, 1,355 yards, 10 touchdowns. He was top 10 in both PFF receiving grade and yards per route run among 286 qualifying wide receivers last year. And he also led SMU in catches as a sophomore and junior. So it wasn't like he just broke out and had this big senior season. Now, that knocks against him. He is a 4-year college player. He's already 23 years old. He played against lower level competition at SMU, but it's still a pretty nice production profile. And then he also tested really well too. He's 204 pounds and he earned a 95th percentile relative athletic score. So this is a nice prospect, and the Chiefs did take him in the second round. Now, he's the third wide receiver the Chiefs have taken in the second round over the past 5 drafts. The other two are McCole Hardman and Sky Moore. Hardman, at this point, it's safe to say he was not worth a second-round pick. Jury's still out on Sky Moore, obviously, but it wasn't a very encouraging rookie season. So I don't really think the Chiefs have earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to evaluating these wide receiver prospects. So we'll see on Rice. He obviously should move up your rankings based on the draft capital and the landing spot. But don't go overboard on it because again we've seen the Chiefs miss on these guys recently.
I think even more important than how their previous round 2 wide receivers have fared is that the wide receiver other than Tyreek Hill in Kansas City has just not been a smash player so far. Tyreek Hill and nobody else has been a big performer. Juju Smith-Schuster gave us some usable games last year. MVS did MVS things, but otherwise it's just been this spot that is overrated in general. And I think the positive is we don't know about Kadarius Toney. We don't know about Sky Moore. So there's room for anybody to take control. The other hand is, it's just this committee and maybe nobody's going to step out and give us regular production. So as long as you don't overrate it, I like Rashee Rice in this spot. We've talked through our individual opinions on these wide receivers, but if you're a DS Insider, then you know that we're not just all giving our individual opinions on the site. We put all this together. We put out one set of rookie rankings. You can find the 1QB rankings and Superflex rankings of these rookies on DraftSharks.com. Right now, we listed everybody's rankings before the draft, but now it's serious time. It's not time to play anymore. It's time to actually do these rookie drafts. It's time to do startup drafts. It's time to get ready for the 2023 season. So check the website. You will find one version. You can see those rookie rankings and you can check the robust dynasty rankings. Obviously that include the veterans as well. That of course takes Jared's projections. It takes Alex's geeky algorithms. It takes Kevin's secret tight end crush. It takes Herms's RB goggles. And then I look at it and fix all the players that everybody else got wrong. And you get these dynasty rankings that have 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year outlooks. It's just the best set of dynasty rankings you're going to find anywhere. So I would recommend that you go ahead, check it out right now. I'm going to wait a second so you can do that. All right, now we're going to move on to the round 3 running backs. And this is an interesting group that we've got to sort through to remind people of the names we're talking about and the order in which they went. Kendre Miller, Tyjae Spears, Devon Achane. I've been calling him Devon for too long, so I'm trying to correct myself out loud. Devon Achane and Tank Bigsby are the round 3 guys. Herms, you are a running back guru through the rookie, profile process. Who's the guy that you want to start out talking about here?
Achane is my boy. I had him very aggressively ranked in the first place because I was really banking on him landing in a spot where he would just have all of his skill set accented by the offensive system and everything and whatnot. And that worked out because landing with the Miami Dolphins, he is basically just Raheem Mostert, but better and like a full decade younger. Because, people think about Achane and they're like, geez, he's a little bit on the smaller side. I mean, he was barely like less than 190 pounds. How much of a workload is he possibly going to get? And then I looked at it. He's like an inch shorter and maybe like 15 pounds lighter than Raheem Mostert is. And we have seen a player like Mostert succeed in the outside zone run schemes. Like, when they're out there doing that thing, or, they're going to pull a guard, they're going to push things to the outside, create a lot of space. So that way it's more about your explosiveness and less about your vision between the tackles, doing the whole gap attack thing. It really benefits players that are super fast, which is what Achane is, as the guy who ran the fastest 40 time of any running back at the NFL Combine. We've seen his production in college just absolutely torching dudes, because once he turns the corner, it's really hard to track him down. He's got Madden level speed. I am just really looking forward to seeing what Mike McDaniel has, in mind for him. And, Mostert's going to be there. Jeff Wilson's going to be there. Who's the other guy that they signed and brought back? Myles Gaskin. So, they brought everybody back. And I think, at first, you're like, oh, no, what are they going to do? But you don't draft a guy on day 2, especially a guy like Achane, and then just not use them because your oldie moldy veteran running backs are there for $3 or $4 million a piece on 1-year deals. Don't let that dissuade you. Achane landed in the best possible spot.
I think who's that other guy is the perfect nickname for Myles Gaskin. Jared, what do you think about Devon Achane landing in Miami?
I'm with Herms that it's the ideal landing spot, and I'm actually most excited about his upside in the passing game, right? Because we know Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they're going to see 50 to 55% of Miami's targets, but their number 3 wide receiver is going to be Braxton Berrios or Chosen Anderson or Cedric Wilson, and the tight end room, Durham Smythe, Tyler Kroft, and Eric Sauber. So there is a clear path for Achane to be the third option in this passing game and get 10 to 12% of the targets right out of the gate, and maybe eventually a 15% target share. I think that's on the table for him. So that's the exciting part. I mean, the weight to me is a concern. 188 pounds. I looked at running backs 195 pounds or lighter over the last 10 years. So that's even giving Achane another 7 pounds. The best fantasy contributors are Justin Forsett, Tariq Cohen, Philip Lindsay, Deion Lewis, J.D. McKissick. That's the type of player we're talking about here. So that's my concern. What is the ultimate ceiling of a guy at this weight? But I think whatever that ceiling is, landing in Miami is gonna help Achane reach that.
Hey Siri, set an alarm for when Jared stops naming Dolphins tight ends. No, I agree. So the question with Devon Achane is that workload. And, Herms, you brought up Raheem Mostert when he hit his combine, or maybe it was pro day, but as a prospect, he weighed 190. He's packed on a little bit more than that now, but similar size dude entering the league. I think you have to make sure at draft time that you don't get too excited about Achane. And when I say too excited, I mean draft him too early, because that workload question is realistic. And this is a good spot to kind of accentuate that. San Francisco has long not only boosted the production of running backs, but also frustrated us by using so many of them that we're not sure who to start. So he could be an excellent player for Miami and still be somebody that we struggle to know when to put into fantasy lineups. So I want to have Achane around. I want to make sure I don't take him too early, just in case he doesn't get those consistent enough touches for me to actually start him and take advantage. That's why I like Tyjae Spears better. And obviously the big issue with Tyjae Spears, we knew about going in, but they decided to tell us more about immediately after the draft. It's the knee stuff. It clearly impacted his draft position. If we are all being told about it on Monday, I guarantee the Titans weren't watching Good Morning NFL and thinking, oh crap, I didn't know that Tyjae Spears didn't have an ACL in that knee. Guys, Mike Vrabel says he's comfy with the knee, said Rand Carthon was comfy with the knee. He did add, we might change that in the future. So, he's acknowledging that we don't know everything about the knee, but that they do know what's going on. I take this back to one of our key components of Dynasty, though, Jared. And when we're talking about running backs specifically, we want to get in early on running backs because they have shorter production windows. So if the Titans aren't worried about his knee enough that they're going to draft him in round 3 with Achane still on the board, with Tank Bigsby still on the board, I'm going to downplay that in my own consideration. I'm going to go for the guy that looks like a better 3-down bet than Achane. He's 13 pounds heavier than Devon Achane entering the league. He's also dynamic himself, 6.8 yards per carry career, good receiving production in college, strong dominator score last year for Tulane. So I had Spears ahead of Achane before. We had Spears as a consensus ahead of Achane before the draft. To me, the way this all played out and the late arriving specifics on his knee aren't enough to make me change that.
Yeah, and it's a pretty nice landing spot, too. Obviously, Derrick Henry is the Titans guy, and there were some trade rumors about a month ago to Philly specifically. That's obviously not going to happen now after they swung the deal for DeAndre Swift. So I think Henry's in Tennessee for this coming season, but this is the final year of his contract, and he turns 30 in January. So, starting in 2024, there's opportunity for Spears to be at least the lead back in Tennessee. And you're right, we do care about a much shorter window at running back. Like the Titans probably only care about the first 4 years of Spears. That's probably what we should be caring about as dynasty owners too. So I don't think the knee stuff is worth knocking him much. I do think it's worth keeping in mind though. And for me, like within this tier, like it's enough for me to bump Kendre Miller over him at least, maybe Achane if I'm in a full PPR league, just because I just rather have a running back with 2 good knees when they're 22, 23 years old. That's kind of just like a tiebreaker for me.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think with all these guys going in the same round in the NFL draft, it's okay if you have these guys in any order, as far as I'm concerned, on your rookie draft board. Herms, are we underrating Tank Bigsby by not talking about him more yet?
Oh, yes. We've gotten to the Tank Bigsby portion of the program. I'm glad that we've finally reached this stage. Yeah, no, honestly, this dude has so much really fun opportunity ahead of him in Jacksonville, because you think about the fact, okay, Travis Etienne is there. That's going to be a bit of a problem. He's probably going to get the majority of the high value touches, especially as a receiver out of the backfield. Etienne is much better at doing that than I think Tank Bigsby is, but Bigsby only has to beat out JaMychal Hasty and Dearness Johnson in order to earn the RB2 role. And also with Bigsby's size, it's not inconceivable that he could immediately take over a lot of like the short yardage stuff and the early down work and make this a lot more of a committee than people are, kind of hoping for, because people that have rostered Travis Etienne for a long time have, hoped for the fact that like, he could be one of the bell cows. He could be one of these like mega producers with all the volume in the world and blah, 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 blah. But their GM keeps drafting running backs. They keep adding to this room. It's clear they want to do something, and you don't take a guy like Bigsby, who had absolutely no offensive line help in front of him in his entire career at Auburn, but still managed to produce year in, year out in the toughest college conference in America. So just, dude, he's going to be a ton of fun. I think he is honestly like the steal of rookie drafts going right now. Like sometimes in the late second round, but he slips into the third round a lot of the times that I've seen. And I think by the time all is said and done, he will be my most drafted running back in this class.
I like it. I think that if Tank Bigsby had gone to any of the other 3 landing places in round 3, I might be drafting him over Zach Charbonnet. I loved the prospect coming into the draft, a workhorse role in college. As you mentioned, productive despite one of the worst offensive lines in the nation. Terrific receiving usage, 15% target share as a senior. That's like Rachaad White level receiving usage to close out college. I think Travis Etienne is mildly overrated at this point. Now, he entered the NFL with huge receiving numbers in college, but the way that Doug Peterson used him last year says that Doug Peterson doesn't view Travis Etienne as an elite receiver among running backs. I'm not saying that Travis Etienne's a bad receiver, but the evidence that Jacksonville gave us last year says they don't see him as somebody that they need to get the ball to as a receiver. Tank Bigsby, I think, is at least close, maybe even, maybe better. We'll see exactly what they think about him. We also have heard Doug Peterson say it takes more than one running back, and we know that that's generally the idea in the NFL. So I think the initial thought for a lot of people is, crap, he's blocked by Travis Etienne there. I think it's really more he's going to share work with Etienne. We'll see just how much they share with the Jaguars. Jared, what do you think of Tank Bigsby?
Yeah, I'm less excited about Bigsby than you guys are. I think his profile is fine. Nothing about it really gets me excited. And I'm probably higher on Etienne than you guys are. Remember that he was a first round pick. And yeah, I mean, Peterson
by a different staff.
By a different staff. Yep. Peterson said all offseason that he wanted to add a back, so I expected the Jags to draft one. I didn't expect it to be a day 2 guy, so that was surprising. I just do you guys think Bigsby is going to have standalone fantasy value behind a healthy Etienne? Because to me, he's the handcuff, which is worth something. But I just don't think he's someone that we're going to be able to start the next, at least 2 years while Etienne is the lead guy in Jacksonville.
I think Tank Bigsby is at least a similar bet for work over the next 2 years as Devon Achane and Kendre Miller are.
I think there's a decent chance that Tank Bigsby could be a guy that you could flex in your lineups this year.
Okay. That'd be bad news for Etienne then. The Kendre Miller point, immediately, yeah, I think that's true. Bigsby might be as good or a better bet, but like with Miller, he's behind an aging Alvin Kamara who has suspension risk, obviously, an aging and kind of like just okay Jamal Williams. I just think, I think Etienne is a bigger roadblock to Bigsby than anything in the Saints backfield is.
Yeah, that's fair. Travis Etienne signed through 2024 at this point. The 5th-year option is an option beyond that. It's no lock the way that the league is treating running backs at this point. We just saw Josh Jacobs last year have the team decline the option. So, we'll see how long Travis Etienne is in the way. And certainly if he's around for 2 years, that's going to cut into Tank Bigsby's value. Not somebody I'm getting overly excited about, but I like the player more than I like the situation. I'm not going to let the situation push me away from him. Roschon Johnson did not go in round 3, but he did land in Chicago, which I think makes him worth comparing to all these round 3 guys, especially because there was no other running back in round 4. Herms, you did the Roschon Johnson profile. Are you drafting him ahead of any of those round 3 running backs we just talked about?
I mean, I would probably consider him over Tyjae Spears just because, at least as far as that goes, it's about risk tolerance. And I am not somebody who wants to invest in somebody that has torn their ACL twice and just has like a ton of like cartilage damage and stuff. But I can definitely understand the world in which, people would prefer the inverse, and like it's a completely defensible move, as we talked about earlier. But the thing about Roschon Johnson is that he only started playing running back in his freshman year of college. He was recruited there to University of Texas to play quarterback as, part of like the dual threat archetype, which I think is actually kind of important and something that people in the Bears front office or coaching staff, I can't remember where the quote came from exactly, but one of the things that they really, liked about him was the fact that he has the instincts of a quarterback that is just playing the running back position. And I think in that Bears offense, in which there's going to be a ton predicated around, play action and run pass option, he will be able to mind meld really well with Justin Fields out there on the field. And that's going to be a super cool thing. And going back to his inexperience, like he's only been playing the position for, however many years now. He never really dominated the backfield because Bijan Robinson was there the whole time, but he still netted round 4 draft capital, which if we kind of grade that on a bit of a curve, screams to me, oh snap, the NFL really likes this dude. And he's huge, and I think he's pretty versatile and also very, very good at pass protection, which is a very important thing. So like, I've already seen a quote saying, the Bears would like to have a committee backfield, this season, blah, 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 blah. But like we hear similar things from teams like this, early in the spring all the time. You never really know what's going to shake out. Deontay Foreman's not costing them a ton of money, but I digress. I've gone too far. I'm just very excited about Roschon Johnson. I love these running backs.
I mean, the key is pretty much every team has a committee backfield. So anybody who reads that and is like, oh, so that's going to cap his upside. Like, no, it's not. There are like 3 teams that don't have a committee running back. That's why you consider that guy in the first round. The thing that impresses me most with Roschon Johnson is he arrived in college as a quarterback, moved to running back, and immediately caught 23 passes in his first season, 30 targets. Like you see the numbers get smaller after that because, as you mentioned, Bijan Robinson's there. Everybody's going to be working behind that guy. But this guy carried 123 times as a freshman, having been a quarterback, did that stuff immediately, can catch passes and can pick up blitzers. And those are things that running backs a lot of times hit the NFL not great at, and they have to work on those aspects. So Jared, when you take a guy that's this size, he can already do those things. It makes me want to bet on him in that backfield. I'm okay with taking him over any of those round 3 guys if you have an immediate need. Now, I think it gets to the question of whether you should be addressing immediate needs over long term. I think specific to running back and talking about a round 4 running back versus round 3 running backs, I think in that case, it's okay to take somebody that you believe is a better bet for immediate work and has a clearer path to production this season.
I'm taking Roschon Johnson over Tank Bigsby in rookie drafts, both for the immediate opportunity and even longer term. I mean, I had them, I think, back to back pre-draft, and I like Johnson's landing spot better. Draft capital, slightly in favor of Bigsby, but not really enough for me to really factor that in. I think you guys nailed it with Johnson in the passing game. The fact that he caught 23 balls as a true freshman at Texas. Bears GM Ryan Poles has already highlighted his pass protection ability as a reason why they liked him And who are the other two guys in the Bears backfield? Khalil
Exactly.
Herbert and Donta Foreman, who are basically zeros in the passing game. So I think right out of the gate, Roschon Johnson could be the Bears passing down back. And I like Khalil Herbert, and the advanced metrics like Khalil Herbert. I don't know if the NFL or the Bears do, right? I mean, they let David Montgomery go, but then they signed Donta Foreman in free agency and they draft Roschon Johnson. So
And Travis Homer.
And Travis Homer. And he's the one who, I thought was the guy who might steal passing down work before Johnson arrived. But I think Johnson has the inside track. So I think the backfield's wide open. I think it will be a committee. I think it's a committee alongside a rushing quarterback in Justin Fields, who's going to take a lot of the goal line work. So it's not an awesome spot, but I think it's a spot where Johnson could get on the field immediately.
Yeah, it's a good spot for, for potential touches available. It's not an awesome spot for touchdown upside, as you say, or receptions. But in terms of just, immediate opportunity, it's nice. I've never been a Khalil Herbert fan. I'm the staff anti Khalil Herbert, trying to keep people from rating him too high. And, you kind of alluded to it. Like, you can't point to these moves and say, obviously they hate Khalil Herbert, but when they let David Montgomery walk, it was like, oh, okay, maybe Khalil Herbert takes over. And then, as you said, they signed Foreman, they signed Travis Homer, they drafted Roschon Johnson. None of those guys is a stud, but it's like, all right, we're going to gather a bunch of things and see what works, as opposed to handing the job over to Khalil Herbert here. So you heard what we think about Roschon in round 3 running backs. Now it's your turn. Where do you rank Roschon Johnson among these running backs? Who's your favorite of the round 3 guys that we talked about? Comment below our faces on YouTube. Tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you. Herms, you've got to pick somebody else besides Roschon Johnson as your favorite day 3 running back. Don't worry, I'm going to write it down in the book. He's not your favorite. Roschon Johnson is your favorite day 3 running back. So I'll start with you and your second favorite day 3 running back.
I think, I don't know if they're my second favorite per se, but at least in terms of the opportunity, Chris Rodriguez there with the Commanders has something kind of going for him, because we think about what's there on that depth chart. Like Brian Robinson, kind of the big boy doing, the between the tackles, early down, short area stuff. And Antonio Gibson's out there on his little pass catching island. But if anything ever happened to Brian Robinson injury wise, I sincerely doubt that they would end up trusting Antonio Gibson with just this mega role, because I think we learned this lesson already. Once upon a time, a lot of people really liked Antonio Gibson, but guess what? He's not going to be, the bell cow that a lot of people hope for, including myself. It was disappointing for me as well. But Chris Rodriguez is an absolutely huge dude, absolutely built, and would immediately step into fantasy relevance as early as this season, and he's just one injury away from doing that. And we can't really say that about a lot of guys drafted in day 3 anyway, because I think like Lou Nichols got drafted by the Packers. He's another guy that I really liked. He dominated college football a couple of years ago, but that would require both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon going down probably. And what are the odds that we're going to see that? And I could say that about however many different players, but Chris Rodriguez is the one. He has the prototypical size to be that, sort of early down type dude. Also probably big enough for some goal line work, so you never know. But that's probably where my head's at least as far as fantasy relevance goes.
I am also a fan of anybody who spells Lou phonetically. Jared, who else do you like among the day 3 running backs?
Yeah, just on Rodriguez, he's interesting too as far as the landing spot goes, because there is a new OC in Washington, Eric Bieniemy, so that maybe opens things up a bit more. Where maybe Robinson isn't quite locked in as the lead ball carrier, so that's interesting. I like Chase Brown, who went to the Bengals. I mean, we were all expecting the Bengals to add a running back. I think we expected them to do it earlier, and I think waiting until day 3 means that Joe Mixon is going to be their guy again this season. But it's the final year of Mixon's deal, and I'd be surprised if they bring him back beyond 2023. So, and this is day 3, so that's not to say Chase Brown is like gonna be the guy starting in 2024, but at least there's an opportunity for him to be the guy. And he's a pretty interesting prospect too. I mean, he spent 5 years in college, so that's not great. The first was at Western Michigan, then he was at Illinois the past 4 years, but he was Illinois' lead back each of the last 3 seasons. 328 carries last year for over 1,600 yards. Also caught 27 balls last year. He's 209 pounds, so he's big enough to maybe not be a workhorse, but be a team's lead back. And he ran a 4.43 at the combine, a 40-inch vertical. He earned a 98th percentile relative athletic score, so he has the athleticism. So Chase Brown, he's maybe the handcuff to Mixon this season. You're not going to get anything from him beyond that. But in 2024, there's at least an outside chance that he's the lead back for one of the best offenses in the NFL.
Yeah, don't get too excited. Like we've talked about some other guys. Don't say he's definitely the handcuff this year and then he's definitely taking over next year, because that's not how 5th-round picks work. But both of those things is possible. I agree. I'm high on Chase Brown for where he's going. Since you picked him, I'll mention Eric Gray. I'll mention Evan Hull, because they both went in the same range as well. Eric Gray is not an exciting prospect because of his 4.6 240. I mentioned him in a short the other day, though. He was productive at Tennessee immediately to kick off his career, despite Ty Chandler being in the same backfield there. Then he transferred after 2 years, finished at Oklahoma, had a big final season at Oklahoma, 1,595 total yards. Slow 40 makes him a weak long-term bet, but with the Giants, he's got to beat out Matt Breida to be the number 2 back behind Saquon Barkley. So he's a Barkley injury from significant work this year. And then Evan Hull, he's a Jonathan Taylor injury, probably from significant work. He was a productive pass catcher throughout college, and to an enviable level, a player that we liked. I think this is a sneaky good landing spot because of the handcuff value to Jonathan Taylor. We're not going to get standalone value, but most number 2 running backs, we don't want to start in fantasy. We want to pick committee guys and high ceiling handcuffs. And in Indy, he's got Zach Moss's competition. He's got Deion Jackson's competition. That's beautiful competition if you're a rookie running back trying to carve out a role. So I like both of those guys as handcuffs heading into this season. Sleeper time. Herms, why don't you start us off with a non-running back sleeper for Dynasty?
Oh, gee, hold on. I got to look this guy's name up. Please come back to me. I have a good one, I swear.
Jared, hit us with a non-running back sleeper for Dynasty.
Yeah, I didn't know how sleepy you wanted this sleeper to be, so maybe this is too up the board. But I wanted to talk about Cedric Tillman, who I liked quite a bit heading into the draft, and I think his landing spot is better than I've seen a lot of people talking about with Cleveland. He went in the early 3rd round, so that's kind of, I think, where we expected the draft capital to be. And I'm just in on this Browns offense in the passing game specifically. I think we're starting to see a philosophical shift in Cleveland to more of a pass-centric offense. You just look at the moves they've made over the past couple of years. I mean, obviously the Deshaun Watson trade to get what they hope is an elite quarterback. They bring in Amari Cooper. They sign David Njoku to an extension. They make the deal for Elijah Moore. Then they spend a 3rd-round pick on Cedric Tillman. So I just think this is going to become a offense that revolves around Watson and the passing game. I mentioned all his wide receivers, obviously crowded out of the gate for Cedric Tillman, but Donovan Peoples-Jones is in the final year of his rookie deal. I think Cleveland sees Tillman as insurance or an eventual replacement for DPJ if he kind of prices himself out on the free agent market next offseason. And even Amari Cooper, I mean, he's signed for just 2 more years. So you think longer term, there's a chance for, I think, Tillman to be a big part of this passing game, in a passing game that I expect to bounce back from last year. We know it was ugly with Watson last year, but I think it's going to be a lot better in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, I think if you look at just NFL draft capital, you're like early round 3, that's not a sleeper. But if you look at where Cedric Tillman's going, he's lasting because people are looking at Cleveland. And they're like, well, they've got so many receivers, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Cedric Tillman's not even going to play. No thanks. But I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones is a former 6th rounder. He's been good. He's been a good downfield guy, but it's not like he's a clear building block. Elijah Moore sucked last year to the point that the team that drafted him in round 2 gave up on him. So he might be nothing going forward. So, there's a path to Cedric Tillman pretty early in his career being at least the number 2 there. You mentioned Amari Cooper isn't signed long-term. So who knows? I agree. I think he qualifies for sleeper time here. Herms, who's your guy?
I really thought I could recall it off the top of my head. I was wrong, but I found it, and this is a really fun one. So Elijah Higgins going in the 6th round to the Miami Dolphins. He's kind of like a wide receiver, tight end tweener. I think if he changes positions, he could be a lot of fun. So 6'3", 235 pounds. He tested pretty well athletically at the NFL Combine. And Lance Zierlein, the guy over there at NFL.com, comped him to Jordan Reed. Okay, so there's not a ton of college production to go off of because, like I said, he was playing wide receiver, but he does have the frame big enough to play tight end. And it's kind of a callback to the stuff we were saying about the Dolphins offense earlier. what do they have at tight end, really? I know, Matt, you didn't want us to name any more of them, but this one actually could be fun if he makes the full transition. He does have the physical prowess to do all sorts of fun stuff like that as a catch first type player in that offense, which they could desperately use. So, if you're just in the deepest of deep dynasty leagues and you have some taxi squad spots, take a chance on Elijah Higgins.
As we saw with Mike Gesicki last year, he's definitely going to need to put on some weight and prove that he can block to actually stay on the field for these Dolphins. But I agree with the opportunity being available. I'm looking taxi squad level as well, and super flex leagues specifically. I'm going to bring up Jake Haener, the quarterback for Fresno State, round 4 pick by the Saints. Small, not the strongest arm. I know it sounds exciting, but he started 29 games over the past 3 years for Fresno State after transferring there. He was a team captain for all 3 of those years. So he transferred, spent a year sitting out, and then the next year his team's like, hey, you're the captain now. He was efficient. He's accurate, 68.2% career completions, 8.4 yards per attempt, 67 touchdowns, 17 picks in his time at Fresno State. Dane Brugler pointed out that he averaged 302 passing yards per game in 5 career starts against Pac-12 teams. So the level of competition wasn't great, but when he did play a higher level, he performed up to it. He's got Derek Carr, another Fresno State alum, in case people forgot about that. Andrew Brees, because he got drafted as the Saints, as resources for learning over these next couple of years. He apparently has already gotten to review film with Drew Brees. So he's going to have some pretty good teammates on his side to learn the game. We'll see if there's anything there. He might just be Chase Daniel long-term. That's why he's a taxi squad guy. But if he doesn't become anything, you drop him, you lose nothing. If he does become something, then, what do we say, Jared, in these dynasty superflex leagues? You want to be the first of the backup quarterbacks.
Yeah.
If Jake Haener looks like he can get on the field, and another of the things Brugler said about him is that he's comfy under pressure. He doesn't get rattled. He knows how to lead his receivers to a spot. So if he quickly proves that he's ready to be a backup, he's a Derek Carr injury away from playing in games.
Yeah, I think definitely worth a pick in super flex leagues if you go, like 5+ rounds. By the way, while you were talking about Jake Haener, which I didn't expect any Jake Haener talk on this pod, but I looked up Elijah Higgins on FFPC, which is tight end premium. He is listed as a tight end there already, which is good news for his value. So and those rookie drafts go, are they like 7 or 8 rounds, I think? So he's definitely worth a pick when you get to the end of those and tight end premium scoring.
And the best ball ones go even farther than that. I'm in a best ball dynasty league, and it goes at least 10 rounds. So thanks, Herms. I'm going to be looking at Elijah Higgins now.
Got you.
You can check our rookie rankings right now for 1 quarterback leagues, for super flex leagues. As I mentioned, I highly recommend you check out the full dynasty rankings with 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10-year outlooks. Of course, they all power the draft war room. We've been using those this week for our rookie drafts, for our startup drafts. They're available for best ball drafts if you're doing those instead of dynasty right now. Draft War Room will sync to the site on which you're doing your draft. It'll give you customized pick recommendations at every single turn. So get on that. Hit draftsharks.com now. Check it all out. We'll be back here to pod every week to give you much more. We're going to be shifting away from the rookies, getting into more redraft stuff. The projections are up on the site so you can check it out, see some of the things that we're going to be talking about, and subscribe here so that you don't miss any of these shows or any of the shorter content that comes out in between. For Jared, for Herms, for the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.